Why did WWE forget about Hillbilly Jim? If you grew up watching wrestling, this question has probably crossed your mind at least once. Was it simply because he lost his spark after that career-ending injury? Or is there something deeper behind it? Well, today we're going to dig into the story and find out the real reason. All right, let's dive into the part of Hillbilly Jim's story that really changed everything for him: his injury. The single biggest struggle of his wrestling career came from a serious knee injury that happened very early in his WWF run. And here's the thing, this wasn't just some small setback. At that time, Hillbilly Jim was being set up for something huge. Vince McMahon saw him as the perfect good guy, a country-loving, fan-friendly star who could stand right next to Hulk Hogan as one of the top babyfaces in the company. The push he was getting was massive, and fans were really behind him. But then it all came crashing down in the worst way possible. One night, while he was chasing a ringside manager during a match, Hillbilly Jim slipped on a wet spot around the ring. That slip ended up costing him dearly. He messed up his knee badly, so badly that he was sidelined for about 7 months. And in wrestling, especially during that era, 7 months away from TV might as well have been a lifetime. By the time he came back, that red-hot momentum he had built up was gone. Many in the wrestling world believe this was the moment that derailed what could have been a main event career. Simply put, he could have been a star. Now, after returning from injury, Hillbilly Jim was still loved by the fans. People liked him, but the problem was nothing new was being done with his character. He'd come out, smile, dance with fans, have some fun matches. But he never really got involved in big storylines or rivalries that could push him to the next level. And in wrestling, if your character doesn't grow or change, eventually the audience moves on. That lack of creativity around his gimmick slowly pushed him further and further away from the main spotlight. Years later, in the mid-1990s, WWE tried to bring him back in a new way. This time, instead of being in the ring as a wrestler, Hillbilly Jim became the manager for a tag team called the Godwins. At first, it seemed like a perfect fit. The Godwins were portrayed as fun-loving country boys, kind of a reflection of Hillbilly Jim's old character. Fans could see the connection instantly, and it gave him a chance to stay relevant on TV without having to wrestle. But things didn't stay that way for long. The Godwins eventually turned heel, dropping their friendly country boy image and becoming more mean-spirited, even leaning into a darker, Confederate flag-inspired gimmick. When that shift happened, Hillbilly Jim no longer fit into the picture. On screen, the Godwins fired him, cutting ties completely. And just like that, his last significant role in WWE was over. After that, he stuck around behind the scenes for a while, working as a road agent and helping out with the company in other ways. But eventually, even that chapter came to a close, and Hillbilly Jim quietly drifted out of WWE's spotlight. But if you're curious about what Hillbilly Jim was really like before the spotlight started to fade away, don't worry, we've got you covered. Before Hillbilly Jim ever became the big, friendly giant we saw in WWF, his journey into wrestling had some pretty interesting beginnings. It all started long before he ever stepped inside a WWE ring, back when he was just James Morris, a young guy from Kentucky with a love for sports. Growing up, Jim was a natural athlete. He stood out in high school, especially on the basketball court. At Bowling Green High School, he was an all-state basketball player, meaning he wasn't just good, he was one of the best in the state. His size, strength, and energy made him a natural competitor, and sports gave him a confidence that he carried with him for the rest of his life. But while basketball was his first love, his attention soon shifted after he discovered the wild world of professional wrestling. Like many fans back in the day, Jim's first taste of wrestling came through television. He was glued to Georgia Championship Wrestling, one of the most popular shows of the time. The colorful characters, the larger-than-life personalities, and the energy of the crowds pulled him in. He didn't just watch it for entertainment, he studied it. Something about the show sparked a fire inside him, and soon the idea of becoming a wrestler himself didn't seem so far-fetched. Opportunity came in a way that almost feels like fate. One day, Jim crossed paths with Bruce Swayze, a man connected to the wrestling world. The meeting happened at none other than his old high school gym in Bowling Green. This was the same gym where Jim had once dominated as a basketball star, and now it became the setting for his first step into wrestling. Swayze saw his size, his athletic background, and his passion for the sport, and decided to help him get a foot in the door. That chance encounter set his entire career into motion. Jim's wrestling career officially began in Canada with Stu Hart's legendary Stampede wrestling promotion. If you know wrestling history, you know that Stampede was like a training ground for some of the toughest and most talented wrestlers in the business. Working there wasn't easy. It tested your toughness, both in the ring and out of it. But it gave Jim valuable experience and allowed him to learn the craft the right way. He also worked for other promotions across North America, wrestling under his real name, James Morris, as he tried to find his footing in the industry. Eventually, he made his way to Memphis, where he started working for the Continental Wrestling Association. Memphis wrestling was known for being loud, wild, and entertaining, and it gave Jim a chance to experiment with his character. That's where he came up with the name Harley Davidson. The gimmick was simple but memorable. He played a tough biker, leather and all. It was a far cry from the overalls and country music image fans would later know him for, but it showed that Jim had versatility. He could step into a role, embrace it, and make the crowd believe in it. In late 1984, he first started showing up on WWF television, but he wasn't in the ring right away. At first, he was just a big wrestling fan sitting in the front row at live events. He became known as Big Jim, the huge country boy who stood out in the crowd. Week after week, fans saw this towering guy cheering and clapping, and it made them curious. Who was he? Why was this big guy always in the front row? The WWF slowly built a story around him. Eventually, the idea was that Big Jim would decide he wanted to give wrestling a try himself. And that's when things started to get really interesting. He got invited onto Piper's Pit, the famous talk segment hosted by Rowdy Roddy Piper. Piper, being the arrogant heel that he was, offered to train Jim himself. It was the perfect setup. Piper thought he could take this simple-looking fan and mold him into his own man. But instead of going with Piper, Jim shocked everyone by choosing WWF heavyweight champion Hulk Hogan to be his mentor. Right there, the story was set. You had Piper, one of the most hated villains, getting snubbed, and Hogan, the ultimate hero, taking Big Jim under his wing. In the early weeks of 1985, WWF started airing vignettes of Hogan training Jim. These little training videos were pure gold for fans. You'd see Hogan showing him the ropes, literally and figuratively, giving him advice and even presenting him with his very first pair of wrestling boots. This was the official birth of Hillbilly Jim, a simple, lovable, shaggy-bearded hillbilly from Mudlick, Kentucky, who wore his trademark bib overalls and carried himself with a kind of good-natured charm that fans ate up. It didn't take long for Hillbilly Jim to make his mark. His first high-profile singles match came at the War to Settle the Score on February 18, 1985, where he defeated veteran Rene Goulet. This was huge. He wasn't just being tossed around as a background character. He was being set up as a new star who could win, who had Hulk Hogan in his corner, and who clearly had fans behind him. But just as everything seemed to be falling into place, disaster struck. Only days later in San Diego, Jim was at ringside during a match where Hogan was taking on Brutus Beefcake. As Hogan's buddy, Jim had his eyes on Beefcake's manager, Johnny Valiant. At one point, Jim started chasing him around ringside. It was supposed to be a fun, crowd-pleasing moment, but then it went horribly wrong. Jim slipped on a wet spot near the ring, fell awkwardly, and badly injured his knee. That injury kept him out of the ring for about 6 months, which at the time was devastating. Remember, wrestling moved fast in the 1980s. If you were gone for half a year, the audience could quickly move on to the next big thing. The WWF didn't want fans to forget about Hillbilly Jim completely, though. So while he was recovering, they introduced a group of family members. Uncle Elmer, Cousin Luke, and Cousin Junior all came in as part of the Hillbilly family. And Jim, still injured, accompanied them to ringside as their manager. It was a way to keep him visible, but it also showed that the company saw him more as a character than as a serious in-ring competitor. When he finally returned to action, Hillbilly Jim was still loved by the fans. He was often paired up with his family members, or even teamed with Andre the Giant. He became the kind of wrestler who was traditionally matched up against the monster heels of the era. Guys like Big John Studd, King Kong Bundy, and other larger-than-life villains. He also had a brief feud with Don Morocco and Mr. Fuji, which even led to a series of tuxedo matches against Fuji in late 1986. These matches weren't about athletic classics. They were about fun, comedy, and keeping the crowd entertained. That was really Hillbilly Jim's role in the WWF. He was there for fun. His theme music, the folksy barn dance tune "Don't Go Messing with a Country Boy," became his trademark. He danced to it with kids from the crowd, the ring announcer, or his partners, and fans loved the lighthearted energy. But the flip side of that is that he was rarely put into serious storylines. He wasn't booked to chase titles or headline big events. Instead, he became part of the show's comic relief. Still, he had some memorable moments on the big stage. At WrestleMania 2 in 1986, he appeared in the famous Battle Royal. At WrestleMania 3 in 1987, he teamed with Haiti Kid and Little Beaver in a comedy-style match against King Kong Bundy, Little Tokyo, and Lord Littlebrook. And at Survivor Series 1988, he stood alongside Hogan, Randy Savage, Hercules, and Coco Beware in a winning effort against a stacked team of villains that included Big Boss Man, Akeem, Ted DiBiase, King Haku, and the Red Rooster. So while he wasn't in main events, he was still rubbing shoulders with some of the biggest names in the company. By the late 1980s, though, his role was shrinking. In June 1989, he briefly stepped in as a replacement for Big John Studd during Studd's feud with Andre the Giant. But it wasn't a long-term push. His last truly high-profile WWF match came in April 1990 on Saturday Night's Main Event, where he lost to Earthquake. After that, his in-ring career basically wound down. Instead of disappearing completely, Hillbilly Jim transitioned into more of a personality role. He co-hosted WWF All-American Wrestling with Gene Okerlund, bringing his friendly, down-home personality to the commentary desk. In 1991, he even returned to the ring briefly at house shows, wrestling against Colonel Mustafa and the Berserker. By 1992, he was one of the co-hosts of WWF Primetime Wrestling, which gave him another chance to connect with fans outside of the ring. In 1996, he made another return, this time as the manager of Henry O and Phineas the Godwin, a pig farming tag team who were billed as his cousins. But when the Godwins turned heel in 1997 and adopted a darker gimmick, they dropped Hillbilly Jim entirely. After that, he settled into a backstage role as a road agent, helping to train and guide younger wrestlers. He made one more fun appearance in 2001 at WrestleMania X7 during the famous Gimmick Battle Royal. In classic fashion, Hillbilly Jim made it all the way to the end before being eliminated by the Iron Sheik, who ended up winning the match. It was a fitting reminder of just how beloved he still was by the fans. Even after he stopped wrestling, Hillbilly Jim remained closely tied to WWE. He served as the official WWE legend host of the WrestleMania Access Tours from WrestleMania 20 through WrestleMania 23, traveling across the country to meet fans in malls and promote the big events. From 1990 through 2001, he also traveled worldwide to represent WWF in sales promotions, from Coliseum Video to Sony Videos. And outside of wrestling, he found another way to stay connected with fans. In 2005, Sirius Satellite Radio gave him his own show called Hillbilly Jim's Moonshine Matinee on the Outlaw Country Channel. Every Saturday, he would play a mix of classic country and southern rock, while also sharing stories from his days in the WWF. It was the perfect blend of his personality and his history. Over the years, he popped back up here and there, like on the Blast from the Past episode of SmackDown in 2012. But his biggest recognition came in March 2018, when WWE finally inducted him into the Hall of Fame. He was brought in by his old friend Jimmy Hart, and for Hillbilly Jim, it was the perfect ending to his wrestling story, a moment of validation for everything he gave to the business. That wraps up today's video. Make sure to hit that like button and subscribe so you never miss an update from our channel. Thanks for watching, and we'll catch you in the next one. Bye.